this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3. Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello. Thanks for joining me this Thursday, April 3rd. And thanks to Turi Ryder for filling in for me yesterday. As I mentioned, I went downtown to hear Tom Skilling and Don Wubbles talk about climate change to the City Club of Chicago. Nice crowd they had for that. The president of the City Club said, you know, we've had prominent legislators, we've had professional athletes, but never have we seen the fan reaction of people lining up to talk to Tom Skilling. He really is a treasure, and I was in line to say hello to my very dear, very old friend, and it was so great to see him. You know, Tom, as I said, for those of you who listen all day, you heard me talk about this presentation this morning with Richard Chu in the 6:30 to 7 o'clock hour. Tom Skilling is not only one of, if not the nicest human being who has ever walked the planet, he is very apolitical. This isn't a guy who wants to talk about anything but weather. Believe me, he eats, breathes, and sleeps weather. And if you meet him somewhere and you want to talk weather, I'm telling you, on a lot of people, you know, it's like, oh, hi, thanks for saying hello. You know, I gotta go. Tom Skilling will talk weather with you until you wear out. He just loves it. And it is killing him. It is killing him what is going on now with these cuts to NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. He said what people don't understand is that NOAA was already understaffed. They not only didn't have any fat, they needed people. And he said instead of cutting further, they should be hiring people. And he and Don Wubbles, I didn't recognize the name, but I should have, because Don Wubbles was a full-time professor at the University of Chicago, tried to retire. As he said, he failed at it, so now he's kind of back doing things. He was part of the group that won the Nobel Prize for figuring out that those fluorocarbons were eating away at the ozone layer. That was him. He was one of those people, wrote the paper. And the two of them made a heck of a presentation. They explained, you know, exactly what this National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration does. You know, silly things like making sure we get tornado warnings and hurricane warnings. And if there's a river nearby you that's flooding, they'll tell you where it's going to crest. Emergency services then know who has to evacuate and who doesn't. Fisheries, farmers, they all rely on data that they get to do their jobs. And, you know, one thing Tom Skilling said was people think, well, you know, if the Weather Service is privatized, well, you know, AccuWeather, they're private. You pay for that. We'll just go to them. And Tom Skilling looked at the audience and he said, where do you think they get their information? They get it from the National Weather Service. And he said, if it's privatized, here's what that is going to mean. Taxpayer money is used to collect the data that will then be owned. Taxpayer money is used to collect the data that will then be owned by a private company who will sell the information back to us. How is this a cost savings? One of Trump's friends gets rich and we pay twice for the same stuff. And, already they've begun not only making cuts to personnel, but you may have read how they're getting rid of some of the satellite balloons because, those balloons, an 8-foot balloon carrying a small package that measures temperature, humidity, and pressure. Whoa, that's a huge cost savings. Yeah, we got to get rid of those balloons. But as Tom Skilling and Tom Duffer explained, those balloons collect precise measurements. Yes, we get some information about weather patterns from satellites, but they're not actually measuring the exact temperature, the exact humidity, the exact barometric pressure. And oh, by the way, when you monitor how the balloon moves, you also get wind direction and wind speed. Those are actual data points, not extrapolations run through some algorithm. Well, we're seeing this, and the algorithm tells us that means these are the data points. How about just having the actual data? And are we seriously... How much money are we saving by getting rid of a few weather balloons, for God's sake? Tom Skilling also made the point, because some of the weather balloons, they tend to, they're in places like North Dakota. But he said weather around the world is like one system. He said there can be a weather event on the other side of the world that affects the weather here in the United States, here in Chicago. And he said this isn't like, on a delay. All this stuff, it's an interconnected system. And when something happens somewhere, it radiates out very quickly. He talked about some communities. There was one community in Illinois that experienced a tornado. And with the data that the Weather Service was rapidly collecting, a warning went out, I forget, he said how many minutes. The people of this small community, it must have been on a Sunday, because he said a bunch of people were in church, and all of a sudden everybody's phone went off, and it was like, hey guys, tornado coming your way, take cover right now. And he said the tornado just devastated the buildings, but because of the warnings, and because so many people were able to take shelter, there were only 3 deaths. And he said this was a community that could have been wiped off the face of the earth, not just the buildings, but the people too. But they got that warning, and that's all in jeopardy now. So Tom Skilling has never been political in his life. But he is horrified by what is happening. They also talked about the fact that Edwin Eisendrath was there. And he asked them, what are you going to do if, like with Columbia University, the federal grants and the federal money goes away from the University of Chicago and the University of Illinois at Chicago? And apparently, at least at the University of Illinois at Chicago, there is now a task force that is trying to identify, if there are these huge cuts, what are the elements of science research that absolutely, without question, have to be protected. The chancellor of University of Illinois at Chicago was the moderator, and she said, if we're not careful, if our personnel, if our budgets get cut and we can't make it up with philanthropy, we have to make sure that we don't neglect certain areas of science because the rest of the world is still moving forward. She said the reason that we've been a world leader is because we have great scientists doing great research. And she said we have to figure out what we have to focus on, because she said if we fall too far behind in some of these fields, even if we have a completely different administration in 3 or 4 years, she said we will never make up the difference. We will never make up the difference. The rest of the world will be so far ahead of us. And she said also there's lots of European universities, she said, that are salivating, hoping to pick off the best and the brightest from our universities and get them to come teach and study and research over there. So she said just actual knowledge and the brain drain, what we're looking at here is a staggering blow. And they're convinced that Trump doesn't understand what he's doing. And that message that Trump doesn't understand what he's doing was also heard last night on Rachel Maddow's show. She interviewed the former FDA commissioner under Biden, David Kessler, the guy who shepherded us through COVID under Biden. He also believes that Donald Trump doesn't understand who is being let go, who is being cut. In fact, one of the people fired is probably the guy who is responsible for Donald Trump living through his bout of COVID. He was very sick. We found out later that he was a lot sicker than the White House led us to believe. And there was a guy who called up the medical companies and said, we know a lot of these treatments aren't ready, but we need to do compassionate use. We need to get them. We need to get them. And the president talked about, miracle drugs. I was sick and then I was fine. The guy who probably saved Trump's life has now just been fired by Donald Trump. David Kessler had a lot to say when he joined Rachel Maddow last night. I want to share some of it with you now. Listen to this.
Because of these cuts that have happened the last several days, I always thought that things were fixable, right? You could fix things. I am very concerned that if these cuts are not rescinded, these will have effect for decades.
You think that the way they have done these cuts, the people they've cut, the number of jobs they've cut, potentially have created a crisis in which we can't ever have these institutions back at strength?
I think we're very close to that. I wonder whether the president really even knows, the extent of what has been done. Remember that night that he was taken by helicopter to Walter Reed? Mm-hmm. He was having difficulty breathing. He had COVID. He was very sick, right? He was given 2 monoclonal antibodies. Right? He referenced those as miracles. They were cures. All of a sudden, he got better. I mean, he could have died, but for those drugs. Dr. Peter Stein's office made available those drugs to the president and to thousands of others. Peter Stein was fired, was let go. I don't think the president knows that. Someone needs to walk into the Oval Office and say, Mr. President, we just fired the person who may have saved your life.
When you think about the kinds of things that are going to come over the transom to America's health officials now, the kinds of things that they're going to need to respond to that you say they will not have the people in place to respond to adequately. What kind of things are those? What are the things they're not foreseeing that they're going to need these people they've just fired?
Probably the 2 most knowledgeable people about bird flu, gone. People who look at the toxins that are in our food, those programs are gutted. The people who are going to just answer the phones, right, to make sure that the next emergency use of that drug, like the president got, they're not there to answer those calls anymore, to make that available to the average citizen, right? The president has to be informed of what the extent of these cuts are. And, we have maybe a week before this becomes beyond fixable.
So, we're approaching the unfixable mark in medicine. We're approaching the unfixable mark for our weather people. And we are approaching the unfixable mark for our science researchers who have kept us at the forefront. There you go. Are you tired of winning yet? And now we get to talk a little bit about tariffs. Everybody's favorite thing, tariffs. The tariff schedule has been released. There's a graphic. I should probably repost it on Blue Sky. 34% on China, 20% on the European Union, 24% on Japan, our supposed ally, 25% on Korea, Great Britain, 10%. I don't know how they escaped with one of the lowest, and so forth. Israel, Donald Trump's favorite place in the whole world. We're putting a 17% tariff on Israel. And the Wall Street Journal today, the headline, stocks plunge, dollar sinks after Trump's tariff blitz. And they knew this was going to happen, which is why he didn't make the announcement till after the markets closed yesterday, because he didn't want to make the announcement and then see in real time the upheaval. But it happened anyway. Oil prices tumbled to worst day in nearly 3 years. Options traders crowd into fear trade. Book publishers talking about the impact of tariffs on them. And then, of course, there are our continuing tariffs and assault on what used to be one of our very best neighbors, Canada. The people of Canada are not really afraid of us. They're not really afraid of our tariffs, and they are ready to do without. I've shared with you from time to time amusing European takes on the insanity of what is happening right now in this country. Yahoo! I've got another one of those. There's a guy by the name of Todd Maffin. He's a big poster on TikTok. And every once in a while, something he posts, I see on Instagram. And Lady B, before we play this, did you get all the bad words out of this one? Because there were a slew of them. But it's funny. Todd Maffin wanted to explain what is going on with the United States and Canada and the rest of the world. And an example that he uses to illustrate his point is beavers. How the people of Canada are kind of like beavers. I know. It seems, never mind, just listen to this.
Beavers are petty little shits. In Russia, a while back, city planners tore down a beaver dam to make way for some construction. The beavers waited till the middle of the night and then cut down every tree in the area and ripped up all the shrubs. Follow a beaver long enough, and it'll hide a literal line of shit in your path to prevent you from getting closer. Beavers, like Canadians, some of the most vindictive sons of bitches you will ever meet. Case in point, 30 years ago, Coca-Cola pulled its bottling plant out of Newfoundland. To this day, Reddit is full of tourists saying, yo, what's with all the Pepsi here? More than a decade ago, Heinz up and closed its 100-year-old bottling plant with no notice. 750 workers left in the lurch. The French's company stepped in. To this day, Canadians buy French's, even though it's an American product. Don't believe me? Check the comments. Beavers, like Canadians, are pleasant, but we hold a grudge longer than a Twinkie survives the apocalypse. You might say we put the Riz in resistance. In America, you might do well to check your own history of battles with your northern neighbors. Exhibit A, the day we burned your White House to the ground. Hell, your own national anthem is about that. Bombs bursting in air, those are our bombs. The flag was still there, that's Francis Scott Key, stunned that an American flag still flew after we leveled Baltimore. We know your history better than you do, and that's the point. America has long reveled in the self-appointed title of leader of the free world. I always thought it rather enjoys watching the world catch a cold when it sneezes. And now it's pushing its weight around to apply tariffs to almost every country in the world. And how is the world responding? London, this weekend, European countries meeting with Canada to cut America's trade out of the loop. Mexican tariffs of European imports slashed. EU restrictions dropped, allowing more investment in Mexico. India and the EU without America. Apex nations without America. Trans-Pacific countries without America. And after this whole trade war is over, years from now, when Trump's not even in office, how will the world view America? Not with hatred, not even pity, but with the one thing America fears the most: irrelevance. This year in the Czech Republic, local authorities have been planning a big dam project for 7 years. Some local beavers moved in, built it in 2 days. Tariffs against Canada start tomorrow. Beavers, like Canadians, are petty as f***, but we finish what we start.
Yeah, there you go. I find that amusing. First of all, a lot of things about beavers I didn't know. But also, he reiterates what I've been talking about, which is the rest of the world isn't waiting for us to suddenly become sane. They are moving on without us. They are forming their own agreements, trade agreements, security agreements, climate agreements. They are moving on without us. So we're going to fall behind in weather. We're going to fall behind in medicine. We're falling behind in science. And when we finally wake up and try to right this ship, who's going to want us? Who's going to want us to be a part of their little clubs? Because we've proven we can't be trusted. Remember when Biden attended the first meeting where there were a lot of European leaders and he said America's back? And one of them, I can't remember which one, it might have been Angela Merkel, said yes, but for how long? More prophetic than we knew at the time, huh? Who's going to want us? And even if they let us back in, they're not going to trust us. They're not going to trust us. And you didn't even get cheap eggs out of the deal. Or free in vitro fertilization. Why did you believe him when you knew he lied like a rug in his first administration? Why did you believe him this time? There's the $64,000 question. One last thing before we go to break, and after the break, we're going to, of course, take your calls and read your texts. My good friend Deborah Norville has announced that after 30 years, the longest run of any female TV anchor, she's going to be leaving Inside Edition. When this season ends, she is leaving Inside Edition. We have a little bit of her goodbye message, which she dropped on her TV audience. Listen to this.
It has been an honor and a privilege to be here at Inside for all these years. A milestone like this is a time for reflection. And on reflection, I've decided that now is the time for me to move on from Inside Edition. They made me a lovely offer to stay, but there are things I'd like to do and places I want to do them that continuing here don't permit. So at the end of this season, I will be moving on. I've got some exciting things in the work, and I'll talk about that later. But what I want to say right now is what a privilege it has been to lead Inside Edition for all of these years, to work with the incredibly talented team here, and to be invited into your homes every day. It's an honor I don't take lightly.
Deb Norville now holding the record of the longest tenure of any TV anchor woman. And knowing Deb, for her retirement's going to be like it's been for Tom Skilling, which is not really. There'll be other things, other projects. Who knows what she'll do? We are going to take a break, and we are going to get to your calls and texts right after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito. The Randy Rhoads Show.
Oh, congratulations to the Fox and Friends weekend morning host, who's now our Secretary of Defense. He's a veteran, everybody. I know, I'm a veteran, too. I'm pretty sure I wasn't on any of Kamala's short list for any cabinet position. But, oh, my God, these picks, it's almost like, well, there's a word for it. It's called patronage. Right here, right now on WCPT 820, weekdays 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Want to join the conversation?
I'm going to say exactly what I think here.
Got something to say?
Everyone needs to hear what I got to say.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
And our very first text of the day is to remind me, thank you very much, to remind you about the hands-off protests that are taking place everywhere this Saturday, April 5th. There is going to be one at Daley Plaza on Saturday. Scott Duff, I think, is going to be at that one, so look for him there. And these are sponsored by Indivisible. There's also a group it's basically called 5051, or I don't know how they say it. It's a group representing all the different states and state houses. They are also involved. It is a united effort to send a message to Donald Trump and Elon Musk that we want them to keep their hands off our government. A simple message. So you can go to Indivisible or 50501 and figure out where to sign up, where your people are going to be. I know that the local Democratic organization out where I live is having a pre-protest poster painting party. Say that 3 times fast. Because this is going to be big. This is going to be very, very, very big. And it is, people say, what can I do? What can I do? This is something you can do. Okay? So thank you for that text. I did want to get to that. It was on my list of things to talk about. I had not arrived there yet. Jim from Chicago is on the line to talk about Tom Skilling. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Hi, Joan. I watched a painful dissertation on TV by Tom Skilling. It was painful to watch because he's trying to explain that there's only 4,000, a little over 4,000 people monitoring the weather for 320 million Americans. And to cut into that is it'd be like cutting out the 3,000 brain surgeons that we have in the United States, to cut it down to 1,500. And the people that have something with their brain, they just have to go without. But this deconstruction of democracy by Peter Thiel, Musk, the guy that runs the Washington Post, whatever he's up to, they really believe that they can rule over the society by the internet by instead of democratizing the internet, they can tailor it to their needs. What's crazy about that is how much money do these people want? Trump is talking about crypto. He's dying to get into crypto to make even more money. My point is,
it's all about. And Musk is just the same way. It's all about the grift. It is all, Musk, Department of Government Efficiency. And if you look at the first agencies he's targeted, you will find a number of them are either in charge of regulating his businesses, or they may be involved in a court action against one of his businesses. They may be in a position to cite one of his businesses for doing something wrong. And those just happen coincidentally to be among his first targets.
Exactly. And then when you hear, as Tom explained the weather, you hear these professors trying to explain education in America. It's so painful to listen to how they're being assaulted by the Trump administration and Musk and Peter Thiel and so on and so forth. To what end? They're not only going to take over the internet, but they're also going to take over higher education and to take over all education, to educate us to the fact that they are going to get as much money as they possibly can get their hands on. it's I don't know what world we're living in, Joan, where Americans, can you imagine Jonas Salk? I remember when Jonas Salk came up with the cure for polio. They asked him, do you want to make any money on this, Jonas? He said, would I sell you the sun? Would I sell you the sun?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are the Americans that I was used to. My God.
And I haven't seen a follow-up on this, but a couple of days ago I saw one report that said that Anthony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the guy who tolerated Trump and got us through COVID, also the guy years ago who got us through the HIV tsunami, he went to get a renewal for his passport and was denied. Now, I don't know the grounds of the denial, and I don't know if it was just a technical thing, but do you really think that's a coincidence? I don't.
No, I don't. I don't at all. But this assault on democracy, but we need bodies. We need bodies at these demonstrations, because even Murphy, Senator Murphy, he said we need more bodies. We were going to get them, Joe. We're going to get them, because I think that this election in Wisconsin was helpful. The lady that won the election, she says, I never thought I'd be running against the richest man in the world when I was a kid in school, you know.
Yeah.
But here I am.
Susan Crawford, Who knew?
Right.
Who knew that the richest man in the world was going to be my opponent?
Exactly. So I think that we're coming to our senses slowly but surely, but the faster the better, because this is an all-out assault on democracy. Anybody can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Joan, it drives you nuts. But anyway, thank you, Joan, for taking my call.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the call. And one of our texters, I mentioned that Tom Skilling gave the example of the tornado, where a warning that went out 7 minutes before the tornado basically leveled a small Illinois town, saved hundreds and hundreds of lives. One of our texters, you are correct. It was Washington, Illinois, which is in the Peoria area, and it was 2013. Yes, that is exactly the storm that Tom Skilling was talking about. And somebody else said, can you explain on air why tariffs are so bad, since it seems most countries already had tariffs in place or they have countered with tariffs? Lady B, I think we have two sound bites that explain this perfectly. The first one I've played both of these on the air before. The first one is you're going to hear from Ronald Reagan. Remember, he used to do weekly radio chats, and he talked about a trade war, which is when you put up tariffs and they put up tariffs, and then you raise your tariffs and then they raise their tariffs. That, my friends, is a trade war. Listen to what Ronald Reagan had to say about this.
Our peaceful trading partners are not our enemies. They are our allies. We should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends, weakening our economy, our national security, and the entire free world, all while cynically waving the American flag. The expansion of the international economy is not a foreign invasion. It is an American triumph, one we worked hard to achieve, and something central to our vision of a peaceful and prosperous world of freedom. After the Second World War, America led the way to dismantle trade barriers and create a world trading system that set the stage for decades of unparalleled economic growth. Yes, back in 1776, our founding fathers believed that free trade was worth fighting for, and we can celebrate their victory, because today, trade is at the core of the alliance that secure the peace and guarantee our freedom. It is the source of our prosperity and the path to an even brighter future for America. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
That was Ronald Reagan, who was, as you might remember, a Republican, talking about how we didn't want a trade war, particularly not with our trading partners. Now, you want to understand what a tariff is? I have a brief clip that a lot of people are playing now. I've been sharing it with you off and on for the last several months. It is from the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It is Ben Stein as a poor high school teacher trying to explain to his students why tariffs are bad for the economy. Listen to this.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Yeah, and that's the fear. Did you catch that? The United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. There are a lot of people who are predicting that we are headed for a bad recession because of these tariffs, which Donald Trump seems to think somehow that if you put a tariff on goods imported from China, that China pays that tariff. They don't. Goods get more expensive. The estimate is by the economists I've seen so far, you and me, we're going to be paying between $2,100 and $2,500 more dollars for the things we already buy in the coming year because of tariffs, which we are going to pay for. Put a tariff on a good that's imported. The company importing it's like, well, we're not going to absorb this cost. We're going to put it on to the price. There's a guy by the name of Lawrence Summers. He was Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. He was director of the National Economic Council for Obama. On social media, he posted today, if any administration of which I was a part had launched an economic policy so totally ungrounded in serious analysis or so dangerous and damaging, I would have resigned in protest. Let's take a break. We're going to be back with more texts and more calls after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
The Hal Sparks radio program.
Walmart's financial chief, John David Rainey, said tariffs are going to be inflationary. There is no disputing that. Walmart has said these costs are going to be passed on to the consumer. 60 to 70% of the things that are in your local Walmart come from China. It might as well be an Alibaba outlet store. And they're about to find out the hard way.
Hal Sparks, Saturdays from 11 to 1 on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Thanks for the texter who followed up on the story about Dr. Fauci being denied a passport renewal. It was posted on X that the U.S. State Department has denied Fauci's passport renewal. It was, and then it goes on to quote some federal official. But the people who posted that are now saying it was satire. It was not meant to be taken seriously, though there is absolutely nothing about the post that appears, like when when you read something posted by The Onion, it'll be like, man wakes up with 3 heads. They're 2 are Republican and 1 is Democrat, doesn't know how to vote. I mean, this was not posted unless you are somehow familiar maybe with this poster and know that they have a tendency not to do that. Anyway, the long story short, this very official post is now being described as it was meant to be satire and not taken seriously. Okay. I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear. I don't really think it's a very funny joke, but you know what? better it be a joke than real, right? So, Steve from the Gold Coast is on the line. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Fine, thank you. And I agree with you. I mean, if this has come from another administration, be it George Bush Jr., Obama, Joe Biden's administration, I could laugh at it. But honestly, if you're this administration, you shouldn't be trying to do this kind of comedy because we don't know the difference given how bizarre your policies are. So that's point one. And beyond that, I mean, you hit it on the head, and I talked about this long before the election. You know, if this actually manifests itself, you're going to see long-term economic downsides. I mean, even if you were to assume that this could bring back manufacturing to this country, it would be 5 to 10 years before you could bring factories online. And those factories would be very modernized. So this idea that, well, we lost 10,000 jobs in this community to a factory in China. Okay, when we bring that back, it's going to be as mechanized as possible, as fully automated, and you might be able to get a couple thousand jobs back. You're not getting 10,000 because most of the jobs lost were not exported. They've been taken by machines. And if you think that, you know, corporate America is going to, you know, all of a sudden give back human beings their jobs as opposed to having machines do it, you're delusional. Mm-hmm. So this is the problem. And the other thing is that, look, there's an old saying in public policy about this relationship in terms of global economics that, you know, countries that trade with each other don't shoot at each other. And that's true. I mean, you know, China, one of the things that keeps China from attacking us and us from attacking China is that we need each other. And, you know, if they were able to wipe us off the map tomorrow, their economy would be devastated. So this is one of the things that, again, it interconnects the entire global community. And, again, people recognize that there's no upside to this. This isn't World War I, where most of what people made and consumed and bought and sold and so forth did it within their own borders. We use things that are made from all over the world, and that's a good thing in many ways. And the other thing about this is that I'm for elevating our industry, but we don't need a U.S. Domestic sweat sock industry. We don't need Americans working in factories in Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois making sweat socks. We have moved beyond that as an economy and as a society. And so we can outsource that to other people. And the result is that we pay far less for those sweat socks because we don't have to pay for somebody in America to make them. I mean, this has just so many downsides, no upsides. And this is the thing about it. There is an argument to be made about this whole question of trade and imbalance and so forth, but this is not the way to resolve it.
No, it is not.
You don't say, I have skin cancer. Okay, what's the solution? We'll cut off your leg. That's where it's located, so we'll cut off your leg. This is ridiculous. So, and if you want to talk about that, that's a long-term policy discussion. And, again, gradually doing this and allowing industries to adjust rather than saying, hey, by the way, tomorrow, you know, yeah, these are the tariffs. Stellantis just announced job cuts. Mm. When you implement this sort of policy in terms of a sensible administration, you say that, you know what, this is going to happen 2 years from now, 5 years from now, gradually. And then Stellantis can adjust and so forth. Not, oh, by the way, you people don't need to come in after next week. Because those people are now unemployed. So rather than actually creating jobs in the manufacturing sector, you are now eliminating jobs. And this kind of instability can actually plunge you into a recession that otherwise wouldn't exist, because recessions are as much psychological as they are anything else. If people believe that things are heading in the wrong direction, they stop investing, they stop buying, they stop building, they stop hiring.
Yep.
And then what happens? You actually get a recession.
Dominoes falling all throughout the economy. Steve, thank you so much for the call. Always appreciate your take on things. My good friend Dave, who lives in Hawaii, texted in, the cost to American families may be higher than you mentioned. This is Newsweek magazine's estimate. Trump tariffs could cost average American households $4,200 a year. Also, because the stock market is just losing value hand over fist, if you have stocks in your 401k or you have one of those retirement accounts, you're losing money. You're losing retirement money. Let's go back to the phone lines. Our good friend Ron from Chicago is on the line. Hey, Ron.
How you doing? The White House press secretary today's Caroline Levitt. She said today that Americans should expect wage increases. Well, don't hold your breath. It's supposed to make us feel better.
Really? Really?
Yes. Yes.
How much of a raise am I getting, Ron?
Well, how much do you want? 10%?
Oh, no, I want 100% raise.
You may have to in order to buy a new car.
Yeah, really.
And I remember my American history in from high school, and after the stock market crash of 1929, President Herbert Hoover said for the next 2 years, prosperity is around the corner, and Trump has started that already today. Prosperity is in every corner of America. So I don't know where he got it from, but he must have got it from Herbert Hoover. Yeah. And there were no tariffs on North Korea and Russia, but there were tariffs on islands only occupied by military personnel. So I don't know how you explain that one.
Yeah, really. There's a lot we can't explain, Ron. And I think that the amount of stuff we can't explain is going to increase exponentially in the very near future.
Right. And one more thing, if you think that things can't get bad enough, the Lori, what's her name, Lori Coomer?
Oh, Laura Loomer?
Yeah, Loomer. She has been advising Trump that which national economic advisor he should hire.
Yeah, Laura Loomer went to the White House to talk to Trump, and she told him that some of the people working in national security weren't loyal to him, and today he fired a bunch of them.
Right.
So, yeah.
Maybe we're going to get to the point where the national security is unfixable, too. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks for the call, Ron. Always nice to talk with you. Let's go to our good friend Ed, who is on the line from Palos Park. Hey, Ed. How are you?
Hi, Joan. I hate to say it, the world is on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And these tariffs it's just pure insanity. Now, evidently, Trump never took history when he was in school. That message by Ronald Reagan explains the tariffs to the letter. I mean, Trump is operating in direct opposite of what Ronald Reagan prophesied. I don't know what kind of advisors he uses. I mean, do you think he's strictly doing this on his own and shunning
You know what
advice?
I think, honestly, and I have been thinking about this, Ed. I think he thinks that imposing tariffs makes him look like a tough guy. I've got all this power and I'm going to do this. Because remember, he imposed not as many or as deep as he did this time, but in his first administration, he imposed some tariffs. And when he was pressured to get rid of them, he would have, like, whatever country he imposed the tariff on would agree to something silly like, oh, well, we're going to do this for you. And then he would say, look at me. I threatened them. I put pressure on them. And they gave us something that they would never have given us if I hadn't done what I did. I think he thinks imposing tariffs makes him look tough.
Yes. Also, Joan, I'm not hearing anything about accountability for Signalgate. I thought they should be on that every day. Should be banner headlines.
It looked for a while like Mike Waltz was maybe going to lose his job. But then the Trump administration keeps coming out and saying, nope, nobody's going to lose their job over this. It was just a mistake. It was just a glitch. It was just a this. It was just a that. And also don't remember, of course, it was Joe Biden's fault somehow.
Mm-hmm. Always. Well, please let them not get away with that. I mean, this is just something that we could really dwell on, and they're letting it slide. And my last comment, plaudits to Cory Booker for his over 25-hour speech.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. He must have some great stamina I hear he didn't even take a bathroom break.
No, he did. I think the Senate rules are what they were reporting on CNN was that the Senate rules now say that a bathroom break every so many minutes or hours is mandatory. So he did get a little help from a few other Democrats so he could run to the potty.
Understood. Yeah. But, I mean, we need more like him. I mean, he set an example. I'm sure he instilled some courage in these other senators. And so, like I say, plaudits to him. And then I heard your previous caller talk about this Laura Lomer, who is really a psychopath. If you read anything about her, I mean, she makes statements that are so outrageous. She's a conspiracy theorist, and now Trump fired national security people.
Yeah, she's really, I mean, she makes far-right people look like they're in the middle. I mean, she's a real QAnon. She thinks, she has said before that the 9/11 attack was an inside job. That actually was brought about by our own government. So there you go. There's Laura Loomer in a nutshell. Literally, a nutshell.
I believe it, yep. And how could anybody, I mean, the videos are there, I mean, and to be able to even give her any airtime is ridiculous.
Yep.
Yeah, so... But she was, during that campaign, she was hanging around with Trump for a few days there.
She was, until she got kicked off the campaign plane. I think the feeling was that she was so radical that she would hurt Trump's election chances. Ed, I got to go. We're getting late to get to the news. So, but I thank you for the call. I thank everybody who called in and texted in. We are going to... take a real quick break and be back with Pat Kreitlow, founder of Up North News. We are going to talk about Wisconsin after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to the day. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Because I had because I had yesterday off, we didn't get a chance to talk in great detail about election results. In Illinois, a lot of the townships that have always been thought of as pretty red have changed over to blue, or did with this last election anyway. Going to talk to Michael Dorf about that a little bit later. But the biggest race that everybody was watching was the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, where Elon Musk donated some $20 million. The Uline family, topped up at a bunch of millions of dollars, and other Republicans donated a huge amount of money, much more money than Susan Crawford got on the other side of the ticket. Brad Schimmel, according to the person in charge of the one of the Republican counties, they thought he was a shoo-in. Elon Musk even showed up. Wore a cheese hat. But not only did Brad Schimmel lose, he lost big time. Susan Crawford won by 10-plus points. And in Wisconsin, man, you win by 1 percentage point, and you can practically declare a landslide. Former conservative radio host and permanent never-Trumper Charlie Sykes had a personal message after the election, a personal message that he wanted to offer to Elon Musk. Listen to this.
I know that you don't know me, but my name is Charlie Sykes, and I live in Wisconsin, and I know that the results from Wisconsin State Supreme Court election are probably causing you a little bit of heartburn tonight. So I just wanted to send you this personal message on behalf of all Wisconsinites tonight. Elon, you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Charlie. Joining me now is Pat Kreitlow, founder and editor of Up North News, host of a daily radio show carried by Civic Media. Pat, how are you today?
Oh, I'm fired up after this week, and I'm inspired by Cory Booker. What do you say? You and I do this for the next 25 hours.
All right. I'm there for you. Oh, wait.
Okay.
Oh, wait. I'm supposed to go see Rufus Wainwright tonight at the Old Town School. Could we do it tomorrow, maybe?
Joan, I'm in my 60s now. I couldn't go 25 hours without a bathroom break. I can barely do 25 minutes.
I know. And, honest to God, I kept dipping into it, and he didn't really start to look tired till like the last hour or so. Mm-hmm. Man, oh, man, that guy, he called attention to what he wanted to call attention to. And people are like, oh, he shouldn't have done that. He should have just made sure he votes the right way. Well, you know what? No, because we were waiting for somebody. And Democrats have started to step up, and I'm glad he did what he did, and I'm glad he did something that drew the nation's attention to the fact that what is going on is not normal. How do you feel about the Susan Crawford victory in Wisconsin, and what does that mean for Elon Musk?
Well, I mean, to go hand in hand with what Senator Booker did, there's a lot to be said for inspiration. There's a lot to be said for motivation. And certainly the victory by Dane County Judge Susan Crawford, who's now Justice-elect Susan Crawford, is very inspiring. A lot of people were motivated to turn out. I saw a headline today, can't remember where, but it summed it up really well. Democrats have a lot of problems, but showing up for special elections is not one of them. And this wasn't a special election, but what they meant by that was, sometimes you have trouble with presidential turnouts, but when you have these, onesie-twosie races that are meant to be really important, a lot of people show up for them. And Susan Crawford did win, 55-45. And yes, our presidential elections are crazy close in this state. But she will be the fourth progressive justice on that court. It's a 4-3 majority. And all four of those justices, all women, all four won their elections 55-45, going back to 2018. So there is something about these Supreme Court races that, with the exception of one race in 2019, where the conservative won, but only by like half a percentage point, that in most of these races, when Wisconsinites turn out and vote their values, they will vote progressive. They don't all think of themselves as Democrats. Once you get party labels and things like that, the races get closer. But look at all the other states out there, Joan, where you had abortion rights on the ballot since the Dobbs decision, or expanding Medicaid, or increasing the minimum wage. In so many states, people voted, for that particular issue, even though they don't typically vote for Democratic candidates. Now, that might be a problem with the Democratic Party, and that's a whole different conversation. But it just tells me that in Wisconsin, like every place else, there are still a lot of people who have progressive values at heart. And by the way, also don't want a billionaire coming in, dropping $20 million, which is pocket change to him, and trying to buy an election. It rubbed plenty of people the wrong way.
Yes, and that's what I think is really, really interesting. Supposedly, Mr. Schimmel, sorry, I always want to call him Schmiel, Mr. Schimmel was hoping that Donald Trump would come and campaign for him, not the black sheep of the family who has one of the worst popularity ratings of anybody associated with Donald Trump. But I think even Ben Wickler did an interview before the election, And he was optimistic, but he was also cautious because God knows in Wisconsin, things can surprise you when it comes to elections. But I really think that people hate Elon Musk, and I don't think Mr. Musk understands just how unpopular he is. Do you?
No, he does. I don't think he understands that. But again, you can be blinded by immense wealth. And there are people who are turned off by him. There are people who are turned off by his actions since he became an elected co-president. But what I think ultimately did it in this case, and it's just my opinion, this race hit a lot of issues. It hit on abortion rights. It hit on criminal justice. It hit on a lot of things. But I think the closing argument that swayed a lot of voters was this. If the world's richest man can come in and put an extra $20 million into this race, that's $20 million extra in political ads on TV and things like that, and this race was this ugly, if he wins, what do you think every election's going to look like in the future? Now, I don't know where the tipping point is where a voter says, yeah, that's too much money. All we do know is $20 million is on the other side of that line where people go, yeah, we can't have that happening here, and took a stand against any single business tycoon being able to come in like an old-style robber baron and buy an election.
Do you think it's a coincidence that right around the time he was, popularity polls were starting to show Elon Musk doing just terribly? And I think a lot of people were waiting to see whether or not he did even have influence in Wisconsin. And now that not only did his candidate lose, but lost by a significant margin. I mean, this Elon's money didn't even make it a close race. And now all of a sudden we're hearing there's reporting in Politico, well, Donald Trump has been talking about how, Elon has done so much, and he was never going to stay forever.
No,
and it's time that, he's going to start phasing out and going back to his businesses. I love him. I'd love the guy to stay, but, he does have these businesses to get back to, and he's really eager to do that.
And he really needs to, because if one report this afternoon said just today, his shares in Tesla lost $3 billion today. So, yes, Elon, your workplace is on line one. I think they want you to come back.
Yeah, and it was reported a couple of weeks ago. Tesla used to be the biggest feeder of his fortune. And a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that the stock has taken such a hit that now it's Starlink. Tesla is no longer the biggest contributor to Elon Musk's personal wealth. And, I see story after story. Here was one from CBS News just on Tuesday. Record number of California residents are trading in Teslas, new data show. And here in Illinois, I've read that in some dealerships, they don't even want to take a Tesla in trade anymore because they can't unload it.
Yeah, it's toxic. The brand is currently toxic. And I don't even know that it would have been that way necessarily just because he helped Donald Trump get elected, or you could say he did get Donald Trump elected. But once he and Trump started doing these massive layoffs and cuts, it said to a lot of people, wait a minute, I thought these were smart business types. And they're not. Instead of coming in with any kind of, surgical precision or anything that was very deliberative about identifying, the so-called waste, fraud, and abuse out there. That's what people were expecting, at least the fiscal conservatives, they were expecting. And when they saw that he was just coming in with a wrecking ball and a chainsaw and a sledgehammer, that really turned off a lot of people, saying, okay, I guess you're not the smart business person I thought you were, and I don't want your crappy car anymore either.
Oh, and by the way, in vitro fertilization, not only is it not free like he promised, but he's actually fired a lot of the people in the federal government that oversee those IVF programs. And oh, by the way, the price of eggs hasn't come down yet either, has it? Very interesting. Right. And I just want, before we go to break, I just want to share with you, because this morning I read the headline in the Wall Street Journal, which was about stocks plunging. Well, the markets are closed now, and that headline has been rewritten. Stocks suffer biggest one-day wipeout in value since March of 2020.
Hey, who was president back then? Oh, that's right.
Who was president back then? Let me ponder that. I'm talking to Pat Kreitlow, founder, editor of Up North News, all things Wisconsin. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820. Choose Views with Richard Chew.
It's taking action that matters. Whether it was 600, 6,000, or 600,000 people out, there's the impact of the voice being heard, but it's also we feeling like I'm not just sitting watching this train go by, this horror show go by, and not doing something. And then when you find that there are more like-minded people than you realize, you understand that there are more of us than there are of them.
Richard Chew, weekday mornings at 6 on WCPT 820.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by Pat Kreitlow, founder, editor of Up North News. You can find it at upnorthnewswi.com because it is all the news of Wisconsin. And before this most recent election, Pat wrote an article about, like, if you haven't been paying attention, here's what you need to know about this upcoming election. And one of the races that you talk about, after, of course, you talk about the Supreme Court race, is the race that was for superintendent of public instruction. And this was an interesting race because, correct me if I'm wrong, because, frankly, I was surprised by this, but the Republican-supported candidate, Brittany Kinzer, I read that she was actually endorsed by the publication in Milwaukee that is considered the biggest news outlet for African Americans. I can't remember the name of the newspaper, but that they endorsed Brittany Kinzer over the Democrat-backed candidate, which was Jill Underly. Talk to me about the ins and outs of that race, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, that endorsement by the Milwaukee Community Journal, not the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, but the Milwaukee Community Journal, gets to a point that was central to this Wisconsin race for state superintendent, and that's about voucher schools. Now, the voucher school program was pioneered in Wisconsin as a small experimental program in just the Milwaukee School District. There are plenty of people, and to this day, people who are otherwise progressive or liberal in their leanings in Milwaukee who wanted to try voucher schools as an alternative to Milwaukee public schools. Over time, we have learned in the 30 years since then that while they're there, and there were a lot of fly-by-night operations, there were a lot that were just, didn't live up to their potential at all. But some did make it. And while they're there, they haven't been in any demonstrable way superior to public schools. They may be on par, but they're not necessarily better when you look at test scores, when you look at the accountability factors that both they and public schools have to abide by. Well, nevertheless, because Republicans have controlled the legislature now for 15 years, they have expanded the program and expanded it again and expanded it again to the point where it's now a statewide voucher system that currently costs taxpayers somewhere between $700 million and $800 million a year. going to vouchers for private, usually religious schools, and it's no longer just this little program for lower-income families in Milwaukee. And it's not just in Wisconsin. There are other states as well where Republicans are saying, I support vouchers, but even this is getting out of hand. We need to tame this beast somehow. And Brittany Kinzer was on my radio show. She was on in several other interviews. And the question I think most of us asked that she could not answer was this: how are Wisconsin taxpayers supposed to afford paying for two parallel school systems in this state? And she would give an answer about, well, it's about the kids, and the kids need to read and all that. Well, we all agree on that, but you still got to pay for it. And ultimately, Jill Underly, the incumbent state superintendent, won a second term by being an unapologetic champion of public schools in Wisconsin. So we're still going to have this voucher debate. There's still going to be people in Milwaukee, in the Milwaukee area, who support vouchers as an alternative. I think a lot of voters were just saying that as a statewide, nearly $1 billion beast, it might be time to look at limits on this thing before, it starts to really cause problems for taxpayers. Yeah. The endorsement, what did it say? What was it? Why was it that, we like her, we think she's the best? It really had to do with, again, the fact that people in every community, and that includes the black community in Milwaukee, there are people there who still believe that the voucher program is what's best for Milwaukee. And they weren't necessarily endorsing her because of her feeling about expanding vouchers statewide, but she has, worked with charter and voucher schools there, so she certainly does have people that liked her work there. There's no denying that as an education advocate, she is dedicated toward raising test scores and closing, the gaps, whether it involves race or, urban versus suburban. So there was nothing really disparaging about her. It's just that she did have the potential to continue a statewide program that a lot of people outside of Milwaukee are having second thoughts about now. Interesting. Well, when I saw that endorsement, I got a little nervous, but I was so glad to see that Underly was again reelected. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was the measure about voter ID, the Republican voter ID law that I believe has been on the books for 10 or 15 years, But there was a measure. Was it just to sample public opinion, or was there a measure to actually amend the state constitution? Oh, yes. The Constitution now includes voter ID, which changes nothing in Wisconsin because that law was passed in 2011 when Republicans first took over the legislature. And now that we have fair maps in Wisconsin, now that we've gotten rid of the gerrymandered, rigged legislative maps, Republicans very nearly lost their majorities in the Senate and Assembly, and those majorities are definitely in danger next year when it's the Trump midterm election. And so Republicans were looking for ways to protect some of their priorities from being repealed or otherwise withdrawn if and when Democrats take over, the legislature once again. So this one they sold to voters as something that was necessary, again, to protect election integrity. And, most voters hear this, and it sounds rather common sense. You have to take a little extra time to explain to voters what's really behind this. Mm-hmm. A, there's no voter fraud. Not zero, but there's no voter fraud on any kind of scale that Republicans like to talk about. And B, it isn't really about voter fraud. It's about voter disenfranchisement. Right. It's about making it harder for people in certain groups that tend to vote Democratic to vote because they are less likely to have an ID on them. Nevertheless, It passed. And so it really is incumbent upon everybody to put pressure on the legislature to do even more than to make sure that everybody does have a proper ID to vote. And if they don't do that, well, then they've exposed themselves for who they are. And that's, again, somebody trying to win elections by cheating rather than on their ideas.
I want to talk a little bit more about what the requirements of this are and if it is something that could be repealed. But we don't have time to get into that now because we have to take a break. I'm joined by Pat Kreitlow, excuse me, who is the founder and editor of Up North News, all the news of Wisconsin. You can get the newsletter, the digital news at upnorthnewswi.com. Pat and I are going to continue this conversation right after a quick break.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Not just Joan Esposito, but also Pat Kreitlow, founder and editor of Up North News, all of the news of Wisconsin. We were just talking about the voter ID law that's been on the books for a while, but now is part of the state constitution. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but even if you are a registered voter, you still have to bring ID, is that right?
That's correct. If you don't have it, you can cast a provisional ballot, but it's, one more hurdle to go over. And Wisconsin's voter ID laws are already among the most stringent in the country. And that's not by accident. Again, these are folks in the Wisconsin legislature back in 2011 who quite deliberately chose to put in place very harsh voter ID rules, and it wasn't because there was any kind of widespread fraud. It was, again, simply to prevent people from voting, and that includes rules like, if you don't have your ID on you at the time, then you would not be able to cast a ballot, a provisional one, yes, but then you'd have to go back and get your ID, and some people might do it, and some people might throw up their hands and go, guess not, and that's exactly what some of the Republicans want to happen.
If people find with a new Democrat, assuming there's going to be a new Democratic state legislature, that this is an annoyance that they don't need, it doesn't make them feel safer, can a state constitutional amendment be undone by a ballot measure?
Oh, sure, but it would have to go through the same exact process, which in Wisconsin is the legislature has to pass it 1 year and then wait, and then pass it again the next year. And if it passes two times in the legislature a year apart or more, then it goes on to the ballot where it only takes a majority of voters to pass it. So you'd need, for this to be withdrawn, you'd need enough Democrats to take the majority in the legislature and enough Democrats who would actually vote for it. And frankly, a lot of Democrats probably wouldn't. They would, because they know what would happen. They know that in their next election cycle, they'd be tagged as being, all in favor of voter fraud. We'd be hearing about all those, those crazy Chicago elections that they love to talk about all the time. Vote early, vote often. And so it would, and then there's no guarantee that the voters would approve it either. So what I tell folks, what a lot of people tell folks is that, there are many hills to die on. And rather than working toward repeal of this, I liken it to the old Ellis Island days when people were coming off the boat. And when they're coming off the boat, what are you doing? You're saying, hi, how can I help you? Can I get you registered to vote? Because you're going to be a citizen here now. Let's help people get the IDs that they need. Let's encourage voting wherever possible. We'll play by the rules that are there as much as you may or may not like them. But let's keep our eyes on the prize, and that is voter turnout with your ID and win elections on your ideas.
How do you prove your ID if you use a mail-in ballot?
You do at some point have to, when you register to vote, you have to show an ID. And when you do the mail-in ballot, if you request it then, and if they have had your photo ID, on file at your local clerk's office, that would be how they validate it.
Okay, so you do still have to have a separate ID that has to be part of the government process.
Right, and so there's still going to be a need for it when you are registering to vote, and then you're on the voter file, and then that's why, again, there are people that want to limit absentee voting as well. They want to make people show up physically with a photo ID at every election. And again, knowing that some people say, it won't be worth the hassle, and they won't go. So when you do make your absentee ballot request, oftentimes you must provide a copy of your photo ID.
Okay. One more thing before we work up to our next break, because audience, when we come back from our next break, we're hoping that Pat and I will be joined by somebody we've spoken to from Wisconsin on this show before, Sarah Godlewski. Will be, if the technical gods cooperate, she'll be joining us after the next break. But before we get to that, Mr. Anger Management himself, Derek Van Orden, is going to be running again? Okay. Yeah, all right. Tell me about that.
We're talking 2026 already, even though Derek Van Orden is only 10 weeks into his second term in office. But a couple of weeks back, his opponent last year, his Democratic opponent, Rebecca Cook, announced that she was going to run. She was announcing now, almost 2 years ahead of time, that she was going to be running, against Derek Van Orden in 2026, or running, whether he was there or not. And over the weekend, during this week, Van Orden told a La Crosse TV station that he is going to run in 2026, and that it is his duty, as he put it. And Rebecca Cook promptly answered that with a press release today saying that already, less than 3 weeks since her announcement, she's already raised $1 million for this race. So we do not have a U.S. Senate race in Wisconsin next year. That's our off year for the cycle. We have a governor's election, but the next level after that for races to watch will be certainly the 3rd congressional district in western and central Wisconsin, and probably a couple of other congressional districts. But if the governor is the most important race next year, this 3rd district with Derek Van Orden will be right on its heels. He's never won by any meaningful margin. He's always just one more temper tantrum away from enough voters finally realizing he's not the kindly grandfather that he pretends to be in all of those political TV ads, that he is a troll on social media and somebody who is much more pugnacious than productive.
That was a big argument from Elon Musk as to why he was sinking so much time and energy into the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, because he understands about gerrymandering. And he as much as said, unless he gets Schimmel on the Supreme Court, Democrats, there are going to be more Democrats going to Congress from Wisconsin, and that would just be terrible. And supposedly, I've heard analysis that big picture, he's terrified that if Democrats take over the House of Representatives, that not only will they kick him to the curb as far as any government interference, he's worried that they will find ways to come after him. All of these agencies that he's gutted that regulate his companies, things like that, that he really did understand that, as much as he wanted to have Schimmel be indebted to him so that when his particular case came before the Supreme Court, he'd get a positive ruling. He also was aware of how this could change things on the national level, which I think is it's very interesting and makes Elon's defeat all the sweeter, ladies and gentlemen. I never said I was nice.
Not in this instance. And remember that Van Orden and Elon Musk, they're going to talk about congressional gerrymandering in Wisconsin. The proper response to that is, oh, please. Because it was actually, we're still living under gerrymandered congressional maps in Wisconsin. We finally took a decade to clean up the legislative maps, but we have not yet cleaned up the congressional maps, which are gerrymandered from 2011. I know I'm part of the reason the maps are gerrymandered, because Republicans were trying to save Sean Duffy when I was running against him in 2012. So they redrew the lines to make my district more Republican. They put some Democratic areas into the 3rd district. And that's why, even though Wisconsin's a 50-50 state, only 25% of the seats are held by Democrats. The other 75% are held by Republicans. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the gerrymandering problem is not something they should worry about if Democrats get elected. It's that it's gerrymandered now and is long overdue to be fixed.
Pat Kreitlow and I are going to take a break. We're going to be joined by Sarah Godlewski for a couple of minutes when we come back.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Pat Kreitlow is the founder and editor of Up North News, all things Wisconsin. Sarah Godlewski is a politician, elected official we've spoken to on a number of occasions, businesswoman, politician, Secretary of States, previously State Treasurer of Wisconsin. I have no time to go into the rest of her resume, or we wouldn't have time to talk with her. Sarah, how are you today?
Oh, my gosh. Well, hello, Joan. It's so great to be back. And I mean, I'm beaming because there's a lot to be beaming about here in Wisconsin, because we made it very clear we cannot be bought. So it's been a good 24-plus hours since the election, for sure.
When you were out and about talking to people, I already talked to Pat about this, about what the people of Wisconsin thought about Elon Musk. The people you've spoken to, what did they say? I mean, were any of them like, oh, my God, he's so great, I'm so glad he's here? Maybe?
No. Oh, my gosh, Joan. Well, I've been doing town halls across the state. In fact, I literally just wrapped up my 3:30 town hall to jump on this call with you. And one of the just really clear messages, whether it was in western Wisconsin or I'm in a rural community right here in South Central, is they're like, look, we believe in fairness and we believe in accountability, but we're watching this billionaire, Elon Musk, make these decisions, for example, in Washington, where he's cutting federal programs, cutting Social Security, but yet he's able to protect his billion-dollar contracts with, like, the Department of Defense. And they want to be able to share this and wonder who's going to represent them to talk about this. And then we're seeing these Republican members of Congress who are treating their job like they're part of the witness protection program, Joan. Like they're not showing up. They're not having in-person town hall meetings. We had a town hall where, Pat and I are from the Chippewa Valley, and on a Tuesday night, we had over 900 people show up.
Wow.
And so I think people are paying attention, and they do not want this country to become like a country of the wealthy oligarchy. They know it's, the will of the people should be the law of the land. Yeah.
Mr. Kreitlow, do you want to jump in here?
Well, first off, Chippewa Valley represented right here on the program today, Sarah. Good to talk to you. I'm so glad to hear about your travels here. Because, as you know, Derek Van Orden, not a fan of the in-person town halls. Tony Weed, the new congressman in Northeast Wisconsin, missing in action as well. In fact, we could get into this later. The 8th Congressional District Republicans are fractured to the point where their own new congressman isn't being invited to some of the county party dinners. So while they try to get their own house in order, that you're doing these town halls is extremely encouraging because, again, there's that appetite out there for people who want to vent about what's going on. And Sarah, you've talked to plenty of people in Wisconsin who tell you what's that phrase you hear all the time? I vote for the person, not the party. And so they're talking to you, and they may have voted for Donald Trump this time around, but what sense of potential buyer's remorse are you hearing from some of the more moderate voters, maybe some of the center-right voters of Wisconsin?
Well, I think that's just exactly it. At these town halls, I'm talking to folks, and they're coming, and they're like, look, Sarah, I never thought that I would be coming to a town hall like this. I've been a 2-time Trump voter, but I'm a farmer, and Elon Musk just cut one of the programs where I'm supposed to get reimbursed for the equipment that I buy, and now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to be paid hundreds of thousands of dollars on top of tariffs, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to make my mortgage. To veterans who were coming to this town hall, again, he's like, I'm a proud patriot. I served this country. I voted for Donald Trump, but yet now I'm seeing Elon Musk cut my veteran rental program, and I don't know where I'm going to live, and I'm going to be probably having to live in my car because I have no other options. And folks that are saying, how is this unelected billionaire able to make decisions that about my livelihood? Because, to him, it might just be a number on a balance sheet, but to us, this is about, like, can we survive? And it's real to these people. And, I think to Elon Musk, this is just all fun and games for him.
Hey, Sarah, can we also get to the notion of, and knock down this notion of people who are saying, well, it's those folks in rural Wisconsin and those farmers who voted for Trump, so, they reap what they sow, good for them, I'm glad this is happening to them. And that's just not the right attitude to have, because first off, if something's hurting farmers, it's going to be hurting you at the grocery store soon enough. Second, we've talked to plenty of farmers who did not vote for Trump. And third, and most importantly, Sarah, again, back to that buyer's remorse, is you can support somebody and still not like what it is that they do once they're elected. There are all kinds of rural voters in Wisconsin and around the country who, this is not the time to disparage them. It's the time to help them see that there's a better way next time they vote.
Well, that's exactly right, Pat. And as we know here in Battleground, Wisconsin, you're literally only winning an election by 1 or 2 votes per ward or per precinct. That's it. And so everybody matters, and we've got to show up everywhere. I mean, if you look at what the latest cuts that Elon Musk was trying to make to Social Security, it was targeting almost rural Americans, and I just am going to talk about rural Wisconsinites, because one of the original cuts that came out was removing the in-person Social Security office from Wausau, Wisconsin. And for your listeners who aren't familiar with Wausau, it's in central Wisconsin, but it's surrounded by a lot of rural area. And what those seniors were really worried about is that Social Security was changing how you could get your in-person benefits. So typically you can get your benefits either by, in person or by making a phone call or by doing it online. And what Elon Musk and Doge is now saying is that you can no longer claim your benefits or update benefit information using the phone service, which for seniors in rural Wisconsin, they don't have access to the internet. And if you don't have an in-person office because Doge just cut it, how are you going to be able to get these benefits that, oh, by the way, you spent decades earning, and yet there's no way for you to get them? And so we're seeing the impacts in rural Wisconsin, and those voters called and they were really upset. And for today, that office, that Social Security office in Wausau is going to stay. But again, these are the things that we are seeing that have real life impacts to folks here.
And, to what you said, Pat, people who say, well, they voted for Trump, let them suffer. I think more people would be inclined to say that if the suffering only went to the Trump voters, but they are taking the rest of us with them. We are all suffering. So what's the point of that? Oh, yeah, let them suffer. Oh, wait, I'm suffering too. No, that doesn't work on a lot of different levels. Sarah, I know you have to go. You are one of the busiest women in Wisconsin right now. Thank you for joining Pat and me for as long as you could.
Well, thanks for having me, and I always love joining you both. So, again, thanks for covering this, and it's great to talk with you both.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. See ya.
Pat, I have a question for you. I read Charlie Sykes. I don't always agree with him, but I enjoy reading him. He has a very entertaining style. He, in this whole election, has been referring to the WOW counties, the WOW counties, as some kind of barometer. And apparently in this April 1st election, Democrats made inroads like they've never made in the WOW counties. What are the WOW counties, and should I be paying attention to them?
Yes, those are basically the suburban Milwaukee counties. I think everybody around Chicago is probably familiar with Waukesha County, one of the most Republican counties in Wisconsin, just west of Milwaukee. But then north of Waukesha and Milwaukee counties are Washington County and Ozaukee County. So that's how you get WOW for Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington. And they were once as deep red as could possibly be. But we're seeing there, as in, suburban areas all around the country, first they were turning purple. Now we're seeing some legislators being elected out of the WOW counties to the point where they're not even the shiny new object anymore. If you want to stay on top of your political lingo in Wisconsin, you got to talk about the BOW counties. Oh. And those would be the ones around Green Bay, Brown County, which is where Green Bay is, Outagamie, and Winnebago. So that's the next, the Fox Valley is basically the next suburban area that is kind of the center point of Wisconsin as a swing state. That if you can win in the Fox Valley, you can win an entire statewide election because there is such a mix of dyed-in-the-wool Republicans and diehard Democrats and diehard independents in there. So we've got the BOW counties and we've got the WOW counties, and then there's a lot to be said for those of us out in western Wisconsin as well, especially in the Twin Cities suburban markets.
I want you to talk a little bit about something that you and Sarah mentioned, where how the tariffs are affecting especially people in Wisconsin. Of the down on the farm, the manufacturing, the real world consequences of this. What are you seeing right now?
Well, it's something we knew was going to hit Wisconsin hard anyway because we have so much manufacturing here. And people say, "What is that for real?" Yes, we don't have like giant auto factories, but when you look at the composite of all the small to mid-size manufacturing that goes on in this state, we actually have a very high percentage of manufacturing jobs compared to many other states. Well, these other countries that are going to be slapping retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. now because of Trump's attack on them, they're no dummies. They're not doing the broad-based, cover everything tariffs like Trump is doing. They know how to read a map, and they know where Trump's soft spot is. And so they're looking at swing states, and they're looking at industries that are leading in those swing states. So the New York Times did an analysis a little over a week ago and said of all of the industries that all of these other countries are threatening retaliatory tariffs, what percentage of the state workforce is going to be impacted by that? And in some states, it's 1% of the workforce, 2%, 3% of the workforce works in these industries that are going to suffer from retaliatory tariffs. Wisconsin is the only, top of the list, the only one approaching 10% of our workforce is in areas that could suffer from the retaliatory tariffs because Donald Trump saw, the stability of global trade and decided to break it.
Mm. Wow, that's incredible. One Republican campaign operative who, of course, did not want to be named, apparently said to a reporter recently, well, if the midterm elections were held right now, we would just be decimated. But they're a lifetime away. There's some truth to that in that people, when the midterms come around, will be focused on what seems to be happening then. But I find it hard to believe that unless there is like a 180-degree course correction by the Trump administration, that when the midterms do finally roll around, it's going to be, well, things were looking bad there for a while, but man, it's nothing but gravy now. I don't know. I don't see that.
No, and look, let's just learn from recent history. Trump's first midterms in 2018, when he was again doing trade wars and hurting Wisconsin farmers, just not to the level that he's really, ramped it up now, but just based on what he did the last time. And remember, this was pre-COVID, so this was just a job performance rating on Donald Trump in 2018's midterms. Democrats gained 40 seats in the U.S. House. All right. The Republican majority right now, you can count on one hand. So if they were to lose 40 seats again, they wouldn't have to worry about being in the minority because they basically wouldn't have anything to do if they get that kind of a shellacking, which, like that person said, if it happened today, that's what we would see. So Donald Trump says that, this is all going to work out in the end. I'm not so sure. We've talked to economists and experts here that think that a lot of countries and a lot of companies will just wait it out. They'll hike prices for a little while. They'll cut back on the supply chain. They'll cut back on jobs. Wait till Trump is gone, because that's still cheaper than trying to move a factory back to the United States. There's plenty of ways to encourage manufacturing jobs in the U.S., but not by this approach. A lot of these big companies will say, well, we'll just wait. And I don't think we're going to see a net positive in time for Trump to save his bacon in the midterms.
And what bothers me is so many of the people who have been interviewed that I've heard in the last week or so, they say that some of the stuff, because what Trump is doing is, like, even with tariffs, so much more damaging than he did in his first term, and they were damaging then, and there's starting to be speculation that we could be in such a hole that we don't ever get out of it, or at least not in my lifetime. That's the terrifying stuff.
It's terrifying, but, we also remember that by the end of Bill Clinton's presidency, we were starting to run a net surplus. We had closed the deficit when Barack Obama was in office. Under Joe Biden, we had the strongest post-COVID recovery of every developed nation. Now, again, Democrats did a poor job of selling folks on that, but those are the facts. And so, yes, Donald Trump can break a lot of things. He can do a lot of damage. But, again, with the right leadership in this country, you can do big things. You can do great things. It's just that sometimes the politics gets in the way. And Donald Trump, say what you will, he certainly knows how to, anger or frighten enough people to do the politics. It's just that he keeps living up to that saying. I know I've told you several times, people who hate government the most should be trusted least to run it competently.
Absolutely. Pat, thank you so much. The time flies when we talk, my friend. I really enjoy this and love to do it frequently. And anytime Jennifer is out of town, I'm happy to be part of your Friday morning panel, because that's always a hoot.
Oh, gosh, having you and or Jennifer and or Mark Jacob on there is always a pleasure to have on Up North News Radio on Friday mornings. It would be great, so come back again soon.
Thank you. Mr. Kreitlow is the founder and editor of Up North News. We are going to take a break, and we are going to be back after the news.
Hey, where's Hal Sparks? I'm not sure where he is now, but I know where you can find him Saturdays at 11. He'll be right here on WCPT 820 for the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
I want somebody who's passionate. I want somebody who can talk to people like a real person, who can make people feel things, who can make people want to follow them.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk.
I'm very pleased to welcome back Democratic lawyer Michael Dorf. How are you, Michael? You must be feeling pretty good today.
Well, I think I'm going to have to work a few more years after what Trump did to my 401k today.
Yeah. I guess.
But aside from that.
Yes, I know. We are all concerned, very concerned. You know, I was just listening to the AP News, and some places I think are kind of soft peddling this. I mean, the Wall Street Journal, you know, stocks take their biggest one-day plunge since March of 2020. In other words, last time Trump was around. I mean, the graphs are just dramatic. I mean, there have been reports that, especially if you buy a car, especially if it's an imported car, in the very near future, that car is going to go up anywhere from $8,000 per vehicle to $20,000 per vehicle. I mean, and you get these quotes from Donald Trump. Oh, my God, we're going to make trillions off of this. Who is, Michael? Who is going to be making those trillions of dollars?
Well, what I'm really curious about, and if there was anything left of the Securities Exchange Commission, I would really like to know if anybody's been selling short within the administration or their immediate family, knowing that Trump was going to do this and knowing that suddenly stocks were going to just shoot down. And I think somebody is profiting from this because of the Trump folks.
Well, you know, my partner Ray, who's very suspicious, he's waiting for the post-election investigation that comes up and finds out that Donald Trump himself was playing the market. Oh, okay, we're going to buy this because now I'm going to make this announcement. Oh, okay, now I'm going to undo it. Quick, sell it. You know, I mean, it's.
He is a very wise man. I think that I agree.
Yeah. On the local level, though, you have to be pretty pleased. We saw some real Democratic gains in DuPage County and in McHenry County. You know, a lot of places in the Illinois area, we didn't have, you know, the big elections like Congress, but we had school board and we had local administration. I mean, a Democrat took over as mayor in Aurora. There have been other Democratic victories, and some of them in areas that have been pretty red for the recent past. What do you think of this last election, and what places did you see the most growth?
Well, if you'll give me a little rope on this one.
Take it away, Michael Dorf.
I think it all starts with the indictment of the ComEd 4.
Really?
Because that's why you give me some room on this one.
Okay.
Because of the indictment of the ComEd 4, Mike Madigan resigns from the Illinois House and, more importantly, resigns as head of the Illinois Democratic Party. And up until that point, all the Illinois Democratic Party ever cared about was keeping a supermajority in the House of Representatives to elect Mike Madigan Speaker. When Madigan is gone, Robin Kelly takes over the Illinois Democratic Party, and they realize that there are other races going on in Illinois besides the State House. Robin gets bought out a couple of years later when J.B. Pritzker buys the party. J.B. Pritzker puts millions of dollars of his personal money into the Illinois Democratic Party, and the Illinois Democratic Party suddenly gets really interested in local races. And I think they put out a press release this afternoon saying that the Illinois Democratic Party got involved in 280 local races this time, which Mike Madigan and his party would never have done.
Really?
They won 222 of those races. And so, you know, I think certainly there's the wave, there's the anti-Trump, there's the anger, but the local party, finally, the state party, got into the trenches and got into all those local races, which is something the Republicans had known about 20 years ago in other states. And this is the thing, ultimately, which is going to keep us alive. And you know, I say congratulations to the Democratic Party of Illinois, because they got a ground game, they had the money, and they realized that these local races are the places you have to start.
Yeah. Interesting. That's so interesting. You know, Mike Madigan, I would have thought that that he would, I mean, because when early in his career, if I remember correctly from Ray Long's book, you know, there were a lot of gerrymandered districts that were felt to be unwinnable, and Madigan concentrated on the ones he thought were most vulnerable and ran Democrats and eventually was able to wrest that Republican majority back. You'd think he would be the one to say, well, you can't win it if you don't have a candidate in the race.
Yeah, well, the only races he cared about, and Ray Long is absolutely right, and it's a wonderful book for people who haven't read it. What Madigan cared about in his redistricting was making sure that the Illinois House was redistricted to make it stronger for him. But these county races, these school board races, all these basic grassroots races that's our farm team to get our next generation of Democratic leaders, he really didn't care about those.
Huh. Interesting. Wow. That's a really interesting framework that you've got there. So what does that mean for the future? If we forget about the ComEd 4 because we have very short memories, are things going to change? Or is this a Democratic trend that you see continuing?
This is a Democratic trend now because I think Pritzker realizes that he needs a really, really strong state party to back him as he runs for president. He doesn't want to have to look over his shoulder at anything, and so he is really consolidating his power so that he can leave the state and run, and nobody's going to be doing anything while he's away. So I think it's going to last for a while, and I think the party recognizes that this is really the way that they have to go. I feel real good about Illinois, certainly, is staying as blue as can be.
Was there a particular race that surprised you?
Not really. I suppose the Aurora race is a really interesting one because Irvin as mayor actually had a really good record as mayor in the 2 terms he was in. He did a lot of good things for Aurora, a lot of economic development, and then he went over. He thought that he was going to run for governor, and he would have had a really good chance to run for governor. Yeah, right. And it's really that. Again, you got to bring Pritzker in again. Pritzker supported Bailey to run against Irvin in the Republican primary by saying, putting all this money and talking about what a great Trump supporter Bailey is, and so Bailey wins the primary, and Bailey's really easy to knock off in a general election, where Irvin would have been a little harder to knock off. And then Irvin just says, well, I'm going to become a Trumper. And he suddenly makes his MAGA credentials really important, and he gets involved in the Republican convention. And I think that all these middle of the road folks and a lot of the Democrats who would probably supported Irvin in the past, they said, he's gone over to the dark side.
Do you think if he had just stayed content to be mayor of Aurora and not gotten into state politics, do you think this election might have been different?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Fiorello LaGuardia who said that there was no Democratic or Republican way of picking up the garbage. And if Irvin had stuck with the things he had been doing as mayor and not gotten involved in this national stuff, I think he could have been reelected.
Wow. I don't know too much about the Democratic guy who unseated him. What can you tell me about him? How do you say his last name? Leish? Or Lesh?
Leish, yeah. And he, everybody, he got a lot of money from the Democrats, got a lot of money from Pritzker, and they all came out for him. All the big Democrats came out. He became a real test case for what the party could do. And from everything he had lost one time before trying to run against Irvin. This time, he really had a lot of major party support, major endorsements, and Irvin was really a much weaker candidate this time than he was 4 years ago.
Wow. Interesting. We need to take a break. I am talking to Democratic lawyer Michael Dorf. We are going to continue this conversation right after this.
Facebook. Message us.
Instagram.
Follow us.
Twitter.
Tweet us.
They keep me connected.
Let's get social on the socials. WCPT 820. The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. Saturdays at 1 p.m.
I'm thankful, really, that anyone could feel they could call into this show and share their real despair and anger. I am. I can only hope that we can get past the disappointment and the anger with each other to once again focus on these longer term and very large fights.
The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath. Saturdays at 1 p.m.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
If you are somebody who's thinking about buying a house, or maybe you're an 8%er and you want to refinance your mortgage, you might find that the company you worked with is no longer around. David Hochberg says 165,000 mortgage professionals have not renewed their licenses in the last 2 years. And some companies that were in the business have simply gone away. In that same time period, Team Hochberg has added loan officers. They're bigger, they're better, and they would very much like the opportunity to earn your business. So if you are getting ready to refinance, if you're getting ready to sell, if you're getting ready to buy, if you have mortgage services on your to-do list, give them a call for a free consultation. You literally have nothing to lose. 855-563-2843 or go online, 56david.com. The number again is 855-563-2843 or go online, 56david.com. Lower.com, equal housing lender, NMLS 1124061.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I am joined by Democratic lawyer Michael Dorf. We are talking about the fact that Democrats made some serious inroads in this last April 1st election. CNN, Michael, was reporting that they had anonymously spoken to a Republican campaign official who said, man, if the midterms were right now, we would get creamed, but that's a lifetime away. Nobody's going to remember how much they hate these tariffs and how much they hate Elon Musk when the midterms come around. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. It is a really long time before the next election. And the question is going to be, what's it like when I go to the grocery store? Am I going to be able to afford more than one bag of groceries? Is my job going to be secure? Is my 401k going to be all right? Those are the things that are going to matter, and they're going to matter in the month before the election, not in the 18 months before the election.
Do you think, though, as committed as Donald Trump is to this course of action that is making everybody's life more expensive, do you think Donald Trump, from now till the midterms, is going to say, oh, yeah, you know what, we're going to turn this cruise ship in another direction. All those tariffs, forget about that. I got what I wanted out of the deal. Even surveys of Republican voters are agreeing with what you just said. Republicans want him to concentrate more on the price of gas and the price of eggs, et cetera, and so forth. But he seems pretty committed. He seems all in on the direction he is taking the economy right now. You really think he's going to wake up one day and say, oh, my God, I better stop thinking about tariffs and start thinking about eggs?
No, but Donald Trump, and this is his whole history, Donald Trump cannot ever admit that he made a mistake. He can't make a mistake, and so he can never learn from a mistake. But he also has no trouble saying absolutely contradictory things and thinking people won't remember he had said it before. I think he will look for a way to get out of this, and maybe as you suggest, he's just going to declare victory and then do something else. But he's terrified of the midterms right now. And that's one of the reasons he pulled Elise Stefanik from being UN ambassador to keep her in the House. And so he is going to think about something, because one of the things I hope the House will not do if it flips back to Democratic, I hope they don't start impeachments again. But
yeah.
I think...
Can we impeach Elon Musk since he's not an elected official? Can we impeach him?
No, but maybe we could deport him because he is he's a South African native.
Ooh, I like that idea. Make him somebody else's problem.
Right. I think Trump has got to find a way to change course, but without admitting he made a mistake.
Yeah. Well, this is testing my memory, and I'm sure yours is better. When he tried to do tariffs in his first administration, and they didn't work out, and he was looking for a way out, it seems to me that a lot of the countries that he had tariffs on, he asked them for some sort of concession, like throw us a bone, like, send us, more do something for us. And then he was able to say, well, I'm canceling the tariffs. I put pressure on them. They got scared, and look what they gave us. I seem to recall that was sort of how he finessed it last time around. Do you think that's what we can expect?
I think that's a real possibility. And then one of the other things that he did last time, and you were talking about the farmers, is when the farmers were really starting to get hurt by these tariffs, he got the Congress to give the farmers these big subsidies, and every farmer got a check to make up for it. And he may try to think of something like that as well, to find constituencies that are really being hurt by the tariffs, and somehow targeting those constituencies that he think will end up supporting him in the next round.
Speaking of Elon Musk, do you believe that the election in Wisconsin, where he invested time and money, is that going to rein him in, the fact that he had this defeat? Is it going to make any difference at all?
I don't know if it's going to rein him in, but from everything I'm reading, at least, the Trump inner circle is trying to find a way to ease him away from at least being as up front in this administration. And I guess the way he was appointed, he has a term that expires next month. And they may try to do that as just a glide path to move him out, saying he's done the job, and now the 130 days are over, and so now he's going to go back and save Tesla again or something. But I think Trump is upset about Musk because Musk has become a loser now. But he's too rich to ignore.
I thought it was amazing. I think he said this on the stage in Wisconsin, but he said it on stage somewhere. He was speaking to people, that he thought it was just outrageous. And didn't the audience think it was just outrageous that federal judges could rule against Donald Trump and say he can't do the things he wants to do? Like, what is that all about? And I'm thinking to myself, dude, it's democracy.
Yeah, it's a shame that he was never made to read the Federalist Papers and understand about separation of powers and checks and balances.
He really doesn't seem to have any idea how government works, does he?
Well, certainly not how our government works, and he doesn't seem to care either. And I think maybe people are finally getting a little tired of the performance.
I've been hearing from different interviews with medical people scientific people, with people who are familiar with economics, that unless something changes very quickly, we may dig ourselves into a hole that it'll take either years to get out of, or we may never get out of it at all. I'm really worried about that. And I know that, returning Elon Musk to the private sector will only be helpful if he takes his Doge boys with him. I mean, do you see that happening?
I think things are going to get better. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people are going to get hurt in the meantime. It's like the McCarthy era, where so many innocent people were really hurt until it finally changed. But I was listening to a lecture by Doris Kearns Goodwin this week, talking about leadership and everything, and then somebody asked her, are you still an optimist? And she said, based on all the history of the United States and all the history she's written as well as read, and the quote she was America is not as fragile as it sometimes appears. And I think that's where we are right now. There's a real feeling, are we really in a true existential crisis now? Is democracy really on the tipping point? And I like to think that Doris Kearns Goodwin is correct. We are not as fragile as it might appear right now, and things are going to get better.
Well, I hope you're right, because I've also heard Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy saying that unless there's some real radical change, we could lose our democracy in as little as 6 months. I think a big part of it will be, for me, whether or not Trump obeys federal court rulings. Elon Musk has basically told him that he shouldn't. Tom Homan, the border czar, has said, we don't care what the courts rule. We're going to do what we want to do. But if Donald Trump defies the courts, then I think we're in super big trouble.
And again, if we go back to history, we have and Andrew Jackson and the Bank of the United States, and the Supreme Court made a decision, and Andrew Jackson says, John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it.
Yes,
and
supposedly
we thought back then, almost 200 years ago, something like this was going to happen. We got through it then. I think we will get through it now.
And what is the reason for your optimism, young man?
It may be a cliche, but I believe in America. And I think that Americans are good people. We believe in a certain type of government, and we are in an anomaly right now with Trump. And I don't think we will let it continue too long.
Okay, we only have about 30 seconds, a minute left, and this is probably unfair to you, but are we going to see Rahm Emanuel coming back to Illinois politics? Durbin seat, maybe?
I wonder about that. I wonder if he would be willing to be one of 100 people. And I would see much more likely that if Pritzker moves on or decides not to run, that Emanuel tries to run for governor.
Interesting. Okay. Michael Dorf, Democratic lawyer, making some predictions. We will write those down and see how things unfold. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Joan. Thank you.
We are going to take a break. We are going to be back with Dr. Zachary Rubin, who I talked to earlier today about measles and a bunch of other stuff. So I've been getting a lot of texts. He's going to answer all your questions right after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Over the last few weeks, I've been getting a lot of texts, people asking questions about measles, about vaccines, even when that's not what we were talking about on the radio. And I've kind of been saving those. And I asked Dr. Zachary Rubin, the allergist and immunologist who we spoke with before, if he would answer some of these listener questions. We were able, he's booked all day long, so we were able to, at lunchtime today, early lunchtime, do a recording with him where I was able to ask him a lot of your questions. And I want to share all that. He's talking about COVID. We talk about measles. We talk about vaccinations. And it's a really fun conversation. So, Lady B, just go ahead and share that tape of me and Dr. Zachary Rubin. I'm happy to welcome back to our program Dr. Zachary Rubin, who is an allergist and immunologist. But what caught my attention was his social media. He posts answers to questions you didn't even know you had. He provides scientific information, some of which we no longer seem to be able to get from our government. If you want to find him, he's on almost every social media platform. Just Google his name, look up his name, Zachary Rubin. Zachary, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks, and thanks again for having me on. I hope you're doing well.
I'm, as I like to say, I'm doing as well as can be expected in these very difficult times.
I can totally understand that because there's just so much going on in the world right now, and I know we've talked before about public health issues. I'm sure that's what you want to talk about today. So
yes,
where do we start?
I have questions. First of all, I have questions about measles, and some of this, it's funny because, you know, I mostly talk to political science people. We talk about politics, but I'm looking through our text line, and I'm starting to get these questions about science, and particularly questions about measles. So, at what age do you need a measles booster?
Right. So there's several different situations when it comes to a measles-containing vaccine. Most people have heard of the MMR vaccine, which contains measles, mumps, and rubella. And so typically the normal two-dose series that is given in this country starts out in infants at age 12 to 15 months old, and then a second dose at 4 to 6 years of age. So even with one dose, you are 93% protected, meaning that you are 93% less likely to get measles compared to those who do not get a vaccine. And then that bumps up to about 97% when you get your second dose about 2 weeks afterwards. However, given what's going on with the current measles outbreaks, not just in Texas, but around the country, many people are concerned about getting a booster earlier. So you could have infants potentially getting it as early as 6 months old. So they can get it between 6 to 11 months, get a single dose, but then they'd have to resume their normal two-dose series because that first dose that they get, it's unclear how effective it is at that age.
But aren't older people supposed to get a booster as well? I've been reading a lot, and I think what the texter was asking about is if you're an adult, there's been a lot of reporting that the measles vaccine you got as a child the protection might have waned. And, you know,
right. Well,
did you get another one when you're 40 or 50 or 60?
Right. So that depends on the age of the person. So anybody born before 1957 probably doesn't need one because they were more than likely been infected with measles, and it's considered to have lifelong immunity if you have that. If you were born before about 1968, then you probably need a booster because at that point you either got a weaker version of the vaccine, which was kind of a killed part of the virus rather than what we call live attenuated, which is given more recently. And you may have only been given one dose. There's also situations where you have healthcare workers, people traveling internationally, or they may be relatively immune compromised where they may need a dose. And that's going to depend on a conversation with you and your doctor and those specific situations. One of the complications about all of this is the fact that You could theoretically get a blood test to measure how many antibodies you have against measles to see if you're protective, but that's not always covered by insurance, and the vaccine is not always covered by insurance. So it really is going to depend upon the resources that are available to you, whether or not you're even able to get it. And what we've learned recently is that there was a lot of funding cuts federally that went towards the COVID-19 pandemic response, about $11 billion, and a lot of that money had been reallocated to other public health issues such as combating this measles outbreak. So there was a report recently that in Dallas County in Texas, where they're closer to that big outbreak that's occurring, they had to close down over 53 measles vaccination clinics in areas where they have much lower vaccination rates than a lot of the suburbs surrounding Chicago. So that is a potential opportunity for more people to get sick, as we have people who live in some areas, they go travel internationally. There's measles outbreaks elsewhere which are occurring because the global vaccination rate has declined, and then there's these outbreaks that are occurring in the country, so people go from town to town, and it's going to spread very quickly, which it already has, because we already have over 500 cases, and we're only a few months into 2025. Many health experts are estimating that we're going to have more cases this year than any other year since we declared measles eliminated back in 2000. This is just not normal.
So if I'm doing the math here. You said if you were born before 1968. So if you were born in 1967, that puts you roughly 58 years old right now. So if you're 58 years old or older, what would you say? Check with your doctor or check with your insurance company and see if they cover a booster?
I would check with both. I always encourage my patients for any issue that requires, medications, vaccines, or testing to always double check with your insurance company, because you don't want to go and get something done and then find out you have a big bill later. So it's always a good idea to check with your insurance and to also talk with your doctor to see if it would make sense for you. Not everybody can get vaccinated, too. There are plenty of people who are severely immune compromised or they're pregnant where they're not eligible to get it. It could be potentially unsafe for them, which is why I strongly encourage anybody listening that if you don't know your vaccination status or you haven't gotten vaccinated, you're not only protecting yourself, but you're protecting those around you and those who cannot protect themselves.
Yeah. We always talk about with vaccines, people who are immunocompromised. We know that you're immune compromised. So let's say if you've had an organ transplant and you're taking immune suppressants, but there seems to be a middle range. For instance, many years ago, I had lymphoma and took the treatment. I'm fine, but it rewrote my bone marrow a little bit, and there are certain immune cells that my bone marrow doesn't like to make. It makes the rest of them, but there's a few that it just sometimes it makes them, sometimes it doesn't. So am I immune compromised?
Well, that really depends upon what your doctor has worked with you on in terms of understanding your underlying blood counts. It's quite complicated to put labels on people in situations like a unique one like yourself. It's possible that you are. There's just relative ranges of what is considered to be immune compromised that really depends upon a discussion with your doctor.
And along those lines, I want to give you a question that also came through on the text line. Somebody texted in, as an adult, I've moved to a few different places. I've had different doctors. I can't seem to find my vaccine records. How do you do that? How do you find out which vaccines you've had if you can't remember and you haven't had the same doctor your whole life?
Right. So it depends on the state that you have been living in. Some states actually have a state vaccination registry. Like in Illinois, we have iCare. So if you got your vaccines here, it's possible that it's in that state registry that you can look up or have your doctor look into that system. So that's one potential way to look up your vaccination record. But not every state has it, or maybe the vaccines were given before those registries were started, so it can be difficult at times. So in those situations, it does come down to talking to a doctor and deciding to run potentially some blood tests to measure the antibodies that would have been formed because of the vaccinations. And if it turns out that they are low, then you can get boosters in those situations. And many times that will be covered by insurance when you have documentation that you're somewhat immune compromised or not showing that you're immune to those particular germs.
If you can't find your records and you want a measles booster, is there any way a measles booster could hurt you?
Well, with any medical intervention, there's always potential risks whenever you're doing it. So vaccines are no exception, but generally the symptoms and side effects are mild. The measles-containing vaccine, the MMR vaccine, because the virus is something that is somewhat slow growing. The symptoms don't always come up right away. It may take several days before you notice them, but it's usually going to be a low-grade fever. Sometimes you could get what looks like a measles-like rash with it. And in rare cases, about 1 in 35,000 chance, you could have the clotting cells in your blood called platelets. They are dropping. We call it thrombocytopenia, but that typically goes away on its own without consequence in most cases. And there's about a 1 in a million chance of having a severe allergic reaction. So there's theoretically risks, but for most people, especially if you are not pregnant or not immune compromised, a booster is generally considered much lower risk than the risk of getting measles, which can be quite severe.
I want to switch very briefly before I wrap this up. I want to switch over to COVID. I've seen recently recommendations that people older than 65 should get a second dose of the current COVID vaccine that's out, even if they dutifully, like me, showed up first in line, beginning of the day, 6 a.m., I'm ready there for the new vaccine. And now I'm seeing that, if you're older than 65, you should probably go back and get another dose of the current vaccine, even if you got one. What's that all about?
So for people over 65, in general, your immune system isn't quite functioning as robustly as it was when you were younger. It's also why generally elderly people are more susceptible to infections, right? And so we've learned over time that the COVID vaccines, their ability to maintain a high level of antibodies that protect you against the virus, it goes down fairly quickly, especially for people who are over 65. So getting 2 doses in a year helps reduce the chances of not only getting sick, but severely sick in a population that is generally considered to be some of the most vulnerable against that virus. So I do strongly recommend for anybody who's listening that if you are above the age of 65, getting a second dose would make sense because COVID is a virus that circulates year-round.
What can you do to try to keep your immune system strong as you get older? Is there a particular diet? Are there foods to eat, foods to avoid? Is there a supplement we can take?
Well, so the most tried and true methods to keep your immune system balanced has to do with lifestyle choices such as sleeping well, having a well-balanced diet in general that's rich in fiber and micronutrients, making sure that you are exercising regularly, and lowering stress levels, which unfortunately is very difficult these days given everything that's happening.
Yeah.
But stress is one of the most potent immune suppressants that could happen to your body, and chronic stress really increases the risk of getting infections. So those are the things. There's really no quick fix, unfortunately, when it comes to maintaining the immune system's overall health. It really comes down to those key points that I just mentioned.
Wow. Yep. Well, that's one thing I do talk to my audience about making sure that you take a break from politics, making sure that you find something that brings you joy or at least gets you to your happy place. I know it's important for mental health, and now I have an extra reason to tell people to make sure that they find their happy place. Dr. Rubin, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for answering all of our questions.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That was allergist and immunologist Dr. Zachary Rubin. He is wonderful on social media. I follow a bunch of scientists and other medical folks, but he is one of those people who's gifted with taking something complicated and making it understandable. He also, from time to time, will reference other media, social media posts where people are saying things that are not true or other misinformation, and he'll correct that. So, look up his name, Zachary Rubin. He's on a lot of different platforms. We are going to take a break, and we are going to wrap up with a little bit about what's coming tonight and tomorrow, and a little bit of silliness when we come right back after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
I wouldn't trust anybody else.
On WCPT 820.
Well, I promised you a little bit of silliness. Jim Acosta was one of my favorite anchors on CNN, and he was not well liked by the Trump administration, so CNN tried to move his show to a time slot where they were going to move him to midnight to 2 a.m. And they tried to sell it to him like it was some sort of promotion. Oh, but it's prime time in California, and if you want to move out to California and do your show, we'll support you in that. Yeah, that didn't go over well with him, and he is now on his own. He has a Substack that he's doing right now, and he does interviews with people, and he posts them. And they're usually very interesting and very fun and very pragmatic. He had a scheduled interview with Adam Kinzinger when word came out that Donald Trump said, yeah, I'm running for a third term. My experts tell me it would be legal. It would be legal. So Jim Acosta decided to talk to Adam Kinzinger about that. And then they just got silly. Listen to this.
You and I are of an age that we remember The Simpsons back in the day and Krusty the Clown. Remember when Krusty the Clown, he just got old, and it was like, it was a commentary on the old like stage actors and, when they get past their prime and so on. And it's just sort of latter day Krusty the Clown vibes.
It is. But the thing is, going for him is he's like angry grandpa on The Simpsons, where it's like,
true.
He
Grandpa Simpson at the clouds, yeah.
Man yells at cloud. But he's especially shameless. And what I never realized is how much shamelessness is a superpower in politics.
Well, that's true.
And I mean, it is. So, Look, I think on the third term thing, we have to imagine that stuff like this could happen, because everything we never imagined would happen has happened. I wouldn't lose sleep on this yet when there's things like due process that aren't happening and all that stuff. There's more stuff to be outraged about.
Yeah. Yes, Grandpa Simpson and Krusty the Clown. Yeah, I can see it. But Adam Kinzinger makes a good point. No matter how insane the thing is that Donald Trump starts talking about, you simply cannot ignore it, because he tries to make a lot of the crazy stuff happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, got to take it seriously. On social media, they are, somebody just sent this to me that, that Democratic Congresswoman Mickey Sherrill has introduced legislation that would require drug testing for special government employees. Who do you think that is? Special. Who's special in our government? Special government employees like, I don't know, Elon Musk? Whether it goes anywhere or not, Democrats have to keep talking. They have to keep doing things like Cory Booker did, and they have to keep pointing out what is happening. Take a playbook, take a page from the playbook of the Republican Party. Tell them and 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 tell them. And maybe with all that telling, something will start to sink in with voters. You can't tell them enough. That is going to do it for me today. As you know, the markets have really, really tanked today. So it is Friday tomorrow. I always start Friday by taking your calls. But early on, I'm going to do a quick call with Terry Savage and get her take on what is going on in the markets and whether or not there's going to be any kind of recovery. Remember, this Saturday is a big move on, indivisible, hands-off rallies, protests all around the country in a lot of different places. If you want to be a part of that, we are going to I'm hopefully talk to one of the board members briefly from Indivisible and talk about that. If you can make it to one of the rallies, that would be wonderful. Patty Vasquez is, of course, up next. She's going to be joined by comedian Chris Jones. I was a little puzzled when I saw that because I thought, Chris Jones, the theater critic and editorial board head at the Chicago Tribune. But no, that's not that Chris Jones, a different Chris Jones. But they are going to be joined by Reed McCollum, who is the chair of the Democratic Party of DuPage County. Like I said, McHenry and DuPage, lots of Democratic victories in those areas. And it's especially important. Those collar counties used to be pretty red. And McHenry County, part of McHenry County is represented by Darren LaHood, Trump's new best friend. Darren LaHood. Interesting. Oh, tomorrow also really important. Get up for Richard Chu's show tomorrow, because remember, the first Friday of every month, he has a live interview segment with Mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Tomorrow is when Brandon Johnson is doing his monthly Chu's Views check-in with Richard. So that's going to be great. Since the last time they talked, it appears that the Chicago teachers have a new contract. Not all the T's have been crossed, but there is a basic agreement that looks like it is going to pass the last remaining hurdles. And so there will be a new teacher's contract. There will not be a teacher's strike. And that's good news. And I imagine that they will talk about that as well as other things. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up real quick, Lady B. I just want to remind you that even though our tickets are gone for our anniversary show, I sure hope you'll listen. We're going to broadcast live that Saturday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So please join us. It's going to be all the people you like from CPT, and we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to have a lot of guests. And it's going to be terrific. I look forward to talking with you on the radio. It's Saturday. I think it's May 3rd. May 3rd? Yes, it is May 3rd. I remembered it. Okay, I'm going to see you tomorrow. Get your dialing and your texting fingers ready. And find something to have fun with tonight, okay? Relax. Enjoy. You have your marching orders. It's good for your immune system. Go do it. I'll see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Good night.